Hiya! In this video today we're making a simple wire wrapped chain bracelet. This design has a 6mm bead in each link on the chain. The contrast between a dark gemstone bead and the silver wire is really pretty. Then we've also made a simple hook and loop clasp for the connector on our bracelet. The rest of the chain is just made with really simple links made with wire and beads, and they're all the same, they're just connected together to form a chain. For this design we're using 20 gauge dead soft silver wire and 6mm amethyst beads. Now each little link we make for our bracelet is 3 inches long. So depending on how long your bracelet is, you'll probably need 12 or 13 of these 3-inch long lengths. So just start by cutting one 3-inch length, making sure it's nice and straight. And then we're going to find about the 1-inch mark. So I'm just grabbing it there with my pliers and checking that it's 1 inch on the right of our pliers there. Holding it nice and tight there, and then we can push this 1-inch length of wire back in about a 45-degree angle. Now we swap to our round nose pliers and grab it just above the bend. Then we can bring this 1-inch length of wire right around the round nose pliers and across the other wire to make a nice little loop on the top there. Sometimes if I need to as well, I just grab that little loop wire and rotate it towards me just a little bit so that that loop is nice and even and round and sits directly over the longer wire. Once you're happy with your loop, we're going to grab the loop on the end with our flat nose pliers, holding it nice and secure there, and then this little tail we're going to bring that around the other wire. You can use your fingers if you can, or another set of pliers so that you can get it nice and tight. Gently bringing it around about 2 times so that you've got a really nice tight, tidy loop and it's all nice and secure. Now you can cut that tail off nice and short, crimp it in tight so that there's no sharp edges and it's all nice and tidy. Now I just grab my round nose pliers and check that loop, make sure it's nice and round and sitting straight. If you're happy with it, then you can go ahead and pop your first bead on. I'm using the beautiful dark amethyst 6mm beads. They have a 1mm hole so they fit on our wire nicely. Now we're going to grab our wire on the other side of the bead. I'm using some pliers with a really small tip, grabbing it up nice and close to the bead so that we can put a bend that's nice and close but still has a little gap between. I'm also lining my loop on the left straight up and down so that I can bend this one on the right straight down as well. Holding it nice and firmly there and then pushing that wire back so that we have our nice little 45-degree bend. Then with our round nose pliers we can grab it just above the bend and then bring that wire around the round nose pliers and over across the other wire to create a little loop on the top there. Again, we can grab this loop and just rotate it towards you so that the loop sits directly above the other wire. Now we can hold this loop nice and tight and gently bring our tail around this other wire, trying to make it even with the first side, so around 2 loops is good if you did 2 loops on the other side. Making sure it's nice and tight and tidy. When you're happy with it, you can cut this tail off nice and short and crimp it in tight so there's no sharp edges. Now you can check over your little loops, make sure they're nice and straight and even on both sides of the bead. So that's your first little link for your chain bracelet. We make all the links the same, and from now on we're going to be attaching each link onto the previous link. So starting again with a 3-inch length of our 20 gauge wire, and grabbing it with our pliers about 1 inch in from the right hand side so that we can bend that little 1 inch length of wire backwards. Grabbing it just above the bend there with our round nose pliers so we can bring that tail right around the pliers and over across that other wire. Rotating that wire loop towards you if it needs it. Now at this point, before you wrap that wire around, you need to pop your first link onto this little loop, making sure it's right inside that little loop there. Then you can hold your loop nice and secure with your pliers and bring that tail end of wire around the longer wire. Nice and tight and tidy, just like the first link. The goal is to try and make sure all your little links look the same, so they've got the same size loops, the same amount of wraps around with the wire, and that they all look uniform along the whole bracelet. Once you're happy with your little wraps there, you can cut that tail off nice and short and crimp the end in tight so that it's nice and tidy and no sharp ends. Now you can pop your next bead onto your wire. Then we can make the second loop on this link. Grabbing it nice and close to the bead with our needle nose pliers. Lining that first loop on the other side of the bead straight up and down so that we can bend this wire down. Grab it again with our round nose pliers just above the bend and bring the wire around the round nose pliers and over that other wire. Rotate your loop towards you if it needs it so that it sits over the middle. Then with your pliers you can grab onto your loop nice and secure and bring that tail around the other wire a few loops so that it matches the other side. Mine is wrapped around 2 times. Then I cut my tail off nice and short and crimp it in tight so there's no sharp edges. So you can see you're starting to form a little chain. And so we just continue making links until your bracelet is as long as you want it to be. So each link is just 3 inches long, starting in 1 inch from the end with that little bend and bringing it around. Then you just have to remember to pop your little beaded section onto that loop before you wrap that wire around and secure it on. I'm going to keep making my little bracelet links until this section is about 18 centimeters long, and then I can add a clasp as well, so that'll take it up to about 20 centimeters long total. I'll show you at the end how I make my really simple clasps, but for now we just continue on making sure all those loops are nice and tight and tidy. We're making nice small little chain loops for a really delicate chain. You can make your loops slightly bigger if you'd like to as well. Just try and make them the same size throughout the whole chain. Just finishing up another link here with our little loop on the end, bringing it around our round nose pliers and securing it onto the other wire. I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same process with our links until we get up to the 18 centimeter mark. With my size loops, that works out to be about 12 links. And then we can make our little clasp for the end of our bracelet. Now we've got some nice length on our bracelet, so on the other end we need to think about making our clasp. So we're making a hook and loop clasp, which is a hook on one side and a loop on the other. So we're going to make a link with a slightly bigger loop on the end. So I've got my wire around the middle of my pliers there, about halfway along the tip, instead of right at the end, so it's just a slightly bigger loop there, and then you can continue finishing off this link the same way, bringing that wire around a few times just to secure that link in place. So you'll have a link that looks the same, it just has a slightly bigger loop on the end. And then we can make a simple little hook for the other side of our bracelet. From here you can still add some more links on the other end if you need some more length. But I've made mine about 18 centimeters long, and then it's going to have the clasp on the end, making it about 20 centimeters long in total. You can try it around your wrist as well. You want it to be about meeting up with the other end there. So if you can see, it's just touching. And then when you pop your clasp on, that's going to make it a little bit bigger, so it should be perfect sized for your bracelet. Now for the clasp, we need a 4-inch length of our 20 gauge wire. And we start the hook part the same way as we've started all the other links. So just going in 1 inch from the right hand side, making our little 45-degree bend, and then making our little loop with our round nose pliers again, bringing that wire right around and over the other wire. Now making sure you've got the loop with the smaller end on your bracelet, because you're saving the bigger loop for your clasp. So just popping it onto our little link that we're making, but this time we're not going to bring this wire right around just yet. I'm just holding that out of the way, and then before we wrap this wire around, we're going to make a little bend in this straight piece of wire. So I measure about 1 inch from the loop, and then we can put a nice sharp bend in our wire, bringing it back down towards the loop again and having those wires sit next to each other. Then we're going to cut the bottom part of this tail off, right where it meets up with our loop there. Now holding our wires nice and secure and sitting next to each other, we can just bring this little tail around the other wires just like we've done on all our other loops, wrapping it around a couple of times, making sure those wires stay nice and flat and next to each other. It is a little bit fiddly trying to hold those wires in place, but just try and wrap them around the base of those wires there, so that you've got some really nice tight tidy loops and it's holding it all nice and secure. Once you're happy with your loops wrapping around, then you can cut this little tail off nice and short and crimp it in nice and tight so that there's no sharp edges there. And you can crimp that whole little connection there, making sure it's all nice and tight and flat. Now this side here will be the underside of my bracelet because I've cut my little tail off and crimped it in that side. Now I just make sure my loops are nice and flat and straight. And then we're going to start to bend our little hook around. So just with my round nose pliers there, just grabbing those wires slightly off to the right hand side of the middle. Gently working slowly with your wires to bend the end part back over itself, making it into a hook shape. Then I bend the very end tip of it up just a little bit, like a bit of a lip, so it's going to slip over your little loop on the other end of the bracelet. You can gently work with your wires on the hook there just to make sure it's sitting nice and even and symmetrical. You can see it's a really simple basic hook and loop clasp. Simple clasps like this work really well for a lot of different designs, but you can see having that little hook there just means you can hook it right through your loop on the other end and it holds your bracelet nice and secure. Super simple to put on and off one-handed, and it looks really cute on your finished bracelet as well. So there's your simple wire wrapped beaded chain bracelet with a simple hook and loop clasp.